It's a story that got a lot of you talking. St. Louis Park City Council voted to stop saying the pledge at the beginning of meetings.
But now city leaders plan to revisit the decision. It's on the agenda tonight. Kaya is breaking down the controversy. She's live outside City Hall this morning. Good morning.
Chris, Gia, good morning. A city spokesperson tells us that they got a lot of comments from the community, and so after that, now they plan to discuss the pledge at a study session tonight. As for the reason for the removal in the first place, there were concerns that the pledge doesn't reflect the city's diverse values. And to be clear, they decided to remove it but not ban it from City Hall. For example, other groups are allowed to recite it. Boy Scouts, they could come in and do that if they had a special meeting with council. They did get a lot of feedback, as I said. Even Minnesota Senate Republicans called the move shocking. And here are a couple more takes about all of this.
More things to worry about than just the Pledge of Allegiance. It's been there forever and ever. Why get rid of it now?
Not everyone who does business with the city or has a conversation with the city is a citizen. We just decided that that was something that we didn't need to do as part of every single meeting.
Last time the vote broke down to a unanimous approval, 5-0, with one council member absent and the mayor absent. So we'll see tonight who's all there and whether they'll plan for a vote or if they end up just discussing it. Gia?